All right, I want to talk for a minute about a movement we're going to be introducing here in class. We're going to be using a lot more over the next several weeks where we use our GHD machine here. We're going to talk about the hip extension. So the hip extension is a great movement to use to develop strength along our back, to work on our posterior chain engagement, and work on our midline stability. It's a great accessory movement for anybody that's lifting weights. It's a great thing. There's a lot of different variations we can do. Today we're just going to talk about how to get set up and do a basic GHD hip extension. So a couple of things to remember. First of all, my priority when I'm doing hip extensions, just like when I'm doing deadlifts or any of my other movements, is to maintain that nice neutral spine. So we want our spine to stay locked into our pelvis. We don't want to see any of that shifting back and forth, any of that rounding of the back. So to make sure I'm not getting into that danger zone on the GHD, the first thing I'm going to do is set up my foot rest here so that it is short enough, it's an appropriate distance so that when I get into the machine, my hips are clear of the pads. If my hips are too close to, into the machine, more toward the center of the pad, then I'm going to put myself in danger of when I go into the movement, my back rounding, and the pads are going to prevent me from being able to keep that nice, neutral, locked-in spine. So I'm going to show you. So this is already set up at a good distance for me, and when I'm doing hip extensions, because of what I just talked about, I'd rather the sled be a little bit too short. In other words, have you a little bit too further out than maybe a little too tall, because again, I just don't want my hips need to be clear of the pads when I'm doing this movement. So we're going to climb in, and just like our GHD sit-ups, I promise this thing is not going to let you go flying. So we're going to lock in here. I'll use my handles to make sure I can get set up appropriately. And now the first thing I'm going to do before I even go into the movement is I want to make sure I have the ability to hold myself in space. So the first thing I'm going to do here in a second is just hold in a position that's parallel to the ground. I might even take it a step back before I get into the machine and try to hold a Superman position on the ground in that good Superman position with my core engaged, my hands out in front of me, my legs together, my toes pointed behind me. Be sure I can maintain that position for 5 or 10 seconds before I try this. But before I try to flex at the waist at all, at the hip at all, the first thing I'm going to do is come out here, and you notice again where I've set up in this position, my hips are clear of the pad. So from here, before I do any movement, I'm just going to see if I can hold this position for 5 to 10 seconds to make sure I can control my body in space before I start the movement. And so what you can see is I'm able to keep a nice flat back. My spine stays in that nice neutral position. So I think with those boxes being checked, I'm good to go ahead and try the movement here. So what I'm going to do is, so my hamstrings and my glutes are powering this movement. They're enabling my hips to take me through flexion all the way down and then back up, okay? What's happening is, so my hamstrings and my glutes are controlling the movement. My core is keeping my spine stable in this movement. So people talk a lot about, are we gonna do any abs today? Are we gonna do any core work? This is a outstanding core movement, all right? So what I'm gonna do here is come out to this position, hips just in front of those pads. I can cross my hands across my chest. I'll come all the way down, back nice and flat. And now from this position, I'm just going to reverse the process, come back up to parallel to the ground. Okay, one thing I want you to notice is what I'm not doing is coming up too far. We don't want to hyperextend that back, okay? We want to just come up to parallel, horizontal, back down, okay? Just like when we're lifting barbells overhead or deadlifting, we talk about we don't want to get into this position because I can hurt my lower back if I hyperextend. Same principle is true here with my hip extension. We don't want to come up too far. So we'll just come down, keeping a nice flat back so that our trunk is perpendicular to the ground. Then we'll come back up to the top of the movement, horizontal to the ground. And if we're not quite ready to go that far yet, so we can hold that position, that static position just in space, kind of parallel to the ground. We're not sure we can go all the way down yet though, so that's totally fine. What we can do is grab a partner and just have them stand here and spot us a little bit. So maybe just as you're building your confidence and your strength, you just come down 3, 4, 5, 6 inches, get back into that starting position. And then as you get better and better, we can start going down further and further and building toward that full range of motion. All right, so that's our hip extension. So look forward to that. There's a lot of different things we can do to modify this movement as we get better at it. We can add weights, we can add bands, an outstanding movement, a lot of things we can do with it. But for now, we'll just work on getting really good at that very basic hip extension.